Welcome to the Last in Line podcast, where we discuss faith, hope, and truth in the lives of amazing servant leaders. You are in the right place if you crave purpose and if you hunger for a life of significance. This podcast applies biblical truth to our daily lives, and we pray that you walk away encouraged and inspired. This is the Last in Line podcast.
Hey, we're honored to bring you some good news. Recent development in our sponsorship programs. We are now partnering with Christ Coffee, who is an online business that is working to save children from sex trafficking, and they are spreading the gospel throughout the world. Christ Coffee is more than just a brand. It is a movement where each cup is a testament to their commitment to high quality beans, the spread of the gospel, and making a tangible impact in the community and around the world. 10% of every sale is donated to the rescue of children and the spread of the gospel. They're actually blessing us and our customers, our listeners, with a discount. So type in Last in Line and you'll get 10% off of your first order. And it is quality premium coffee beans. Gentlemen, the dark roast is some of the best I've ever had. So don't wait. Go to Christ Coffee, order your first bag, use Last in Line for 10% off that first order, and I guarantee you'll keep coming back. Brew a cup, rescue a child with Christ Coffee. Gentlemen, today our guest is Ben Pilgreen, who is a head pastor at a church in San Francisco called Epic Church. He's the founder and current lead pastor, and they're in downtown San Francisco. And as you can imagine, Ben is faced with several cultural challenges, different dynamics with different lifestyles and walks of life, and just you can probably imagine what San Francisco is like, and to plan and start a church there and lead. You can imagine what he deals with on a daily basis. But it was nice to have him on because we talk about his new book, Bring It Out: How to Cultivate the Unique Gifts and Assignments You've Been Given. And ultimately, he is a guy with a servant's heart who wants to reach out to all people, obviously. And God is not a discriminator of persons, and neither are we. And so he's in a prime fertile soil out there to reach lost people, and he's doing it through coaching, through pastoring, through writing. He's podcasting. So Ben was a pleasure to have. We talk a lot about what were some of the barriers to bringing this book to life. What are some of the paralyzers out there in all of us to not identify the gifts and be hesitant or apprehensive on how to dig those out of us and actually utilize those gifts. Talk about Christian men and some of the things we're dealing with, and some of the issues we're trying to navigate as leaders of our home. And, he talks a lot about integrity over influence. And he talks about the Apostle Paul and his life and letting go of our past in order to really step into what God has called us to do. So it was a good time. It was a good conversation. I think you're going to enjoy his book. With that, help me welcome Ben Pilgreen to Last in Line podcast. Ben Pilgreen, welcome to Last in Line podcast. Man, it's great to meet you. Great to have you in the family.
Thanks so much, John. It's an honor to be here.
I told you that I had to hit record before we talked about your release of the book, because selfishly, I wanted everyone to know how cool I was, because you chose my birthday to release this book on August 27th. I mean, come on now.
Happy birthday on August 27th. I mean, we won't ask how old you are or share any birthday secrets, but...
Well, if I let this grow out anymore, you'd probably be able to get in the ballpark with some of the gray. But I'll be 52 on Tuesday.
Nice.
And yeah, we've got a 4-month-old granddaughter, our first. And so she is the apple of everybody's eye. So we're fighting over her pretty regular.
I look forward to that day.
Yeah. How many kids do you have?
We have four.
Yep.
Four. We've got a junior in college, a freshman in college, and two juniors in high school. Not twins. We have three biological sons, and we adopted our daughter Kavita when she was 9 from India. She's 18 now. So yeah, it's
That's
I feel
great.
young until I start talking about the ages of my kids.
I mean, it'll do it. Yeah,
But I
it's
feel
just the
young.
beginning.
I'd rather feel young than feel old, and it be the opposite.
It's just beginning, just the beginning. No, it's cool. I have four children as well. I've got three boys, 26,
Okay.
23, 18, and then my daughter was the last, and she's 16. And
It's fun.
she might be tougher than the other three. So,
Understood.
man, thanks for doing this. I know your publisher has been very gracious to us to introduce and connect us, and you are releasing a book called Bring It Out. Got to know what it is without giving the whole thing away and stealing my outline, but what is it in a nutshell?
Yeah, I mean, I think, my own journey, especially, we've been in San Francisco for the last 14 years, and I've just become more convinced that every human being has unique things deposited into them. And some people need help clarifying what that is. But even once you have that clarity, so many people need help removing the obstacles that are in the way from sort of the dream that's in their heart, with that being a lived reality. And so my passion is to help. How do we narrow focus? Like, here's ways you can know what has been put into you, and then I want to come alongside the reader, or if I'm teaching the audience, or if I'm podcasting, and just say, hey, I want to help draw this stuff out of you. I want to help bring it out of you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of us that are probably spinning our wheels, chasing our tail, searching for it and then figuring it out how to practically develop and utilize it.
Sure.
And it is different, obviously, for everybody. But so you're
Yeah.
a vocational pastor. Tell us about your background professionally and kind of maybe how you met your wife. Maybe take us down that road and kind of go into some of your vocation.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love talking about vocation, and I think it's been, eye-opening to understand that we have multiple vocations, and most of them we might not get paid for it. But Sean and I met working at a youth camp in the summer of 1999. We were both camp counselors there. Met, dated long. We were both going into our senior years of college. Dated long. I was in Louisiana. She was in Virginia. We met and started dating. Dated long distance, not a long engagement, so a long distance, but for a short time. And got married in December of 2000. So, man, we're celebrating 24 years this right before Christmas this year.
Mm.
And she's amazing. She is in full-time ministry herself. This is my first book, perhaps my last, but she has been a published author twice already, and has a real passion to write. She also has a passion for helping people understand how to share their faith, especially in a secular context like the one that we live here in San Francisco. She works for Alpha USA. Alpha was, of course, birthed in London. And so, she leads a trip to London a couple times a year. Anyway, long story short, we have lived in San Francisco for 14 years. I told you about the 4 kids. We moved here in the summer of 2010, really for the explicit purpose to start Epic Church in the heart of downtown, which is where I'm sitting right now still, all these years later.
I mean, I'd be crazy not to ask about maybe how that journey started out, because, if you've been there a little bit, you've probably dialed in on how to make it work, but obviously still growing and learning on a daily basis. But what were some of the, maybe what was some of the biggest challenges when you first started?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge is just what is it like to live in a city like this? Just the density alone. It's San Francisco is not a big city, but it's second in density only to Manhattan. So it's crowded. You've got to pay to park, and that's if you find a parking space. So when we moved here, I was like, I cannot believe we have to pay to park. Now you're like, here's $20, just give me a spot. So that was a challenge. I mean, starting a business or a church anywhere is a challenge that your listeners would be familiar with. But here, it was like, wow, the market was wide open for more churches, that's for sure. But would there be a market fit, to use business language? It's crazy expensive. Gosh, 2010, it was so expensive. It's only gotten more expensive to live here, which means it's more expensive to raise kids, which means it's more expensive to raise and fund a church. And so I think the expense is a lot, and it takes a toll on you living here in a way listen, pros and cons everywhere. But you're constantly thinking, okay, do I take the train today? If the train gets bogged down, what do I do? My kids are riding city buses. We have mostly done public school in San Francisco. That's a whole unique thing. As a dad,
Wow. Hmm.
it's a very transient city. So like we lose 25% of our congregation every year, not going to other churches, just people who leave the city. So you have that to deal with, the expense, and then you're talking about bringing on staff, and you've got to pay them a living wage, and so it's my normal life. But when I
Mm.
get outside of it, and someone asks a question like you just asked, like, yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy. We have 11,000 square feet in a basement. It's a beautiful space and a great location, but our rent as a church is 45 grand a month for 11,000 square feet. So I
Hmm.
think just perspective wise, to
Wow.
give people a sense of like, oh my gosh, people that park in the parking lot across from our church, they get reimbursed $10 cash every Sunday when they show up. So that's unique. It's just a very different
But
set of questions we live with here.
yeah, and I would say, and I don't, I'll be the one to say it since you might have some
Sure.
lines to, toe because you have you're shepherding a flock, and we've got to be a little bit PC, I guess. But man, to plant a church or to pastor a church there, like, what the rest of the country thinks of when they think of maybe
Sure.
that particular city, and you hear
Yeah, they tell
the
me.
horror stories about
Yeah.
syringes in the street everywhere, and just kind of the grossness. And I guess every city's got a version of that. But what can you say about maybe a
Mm.
little bit of the, to keep it on a positive note, like what can you
Yeah.
say about some of the impact you're having in some of those more
Hmm.
lost circles socially?
Yeah, it's a great question. And to your point, there is a lot of challenging stuff here. And that is the narrative that's being told. And so what you're not going to hear me say is like those things are untrue. I mean, a lot of that is true. A lot of it is heartbreaking and even makes us angry at times. But there are so many other stories that are not being told. I mean, we're having more growth in our church than we've ever had. We just bought a building 2 blocks from the Giants baseball stadium. We had more middle school and high school students this past Sunday than any Sunday before.
Nice.
So like people that are investing millions of dollars in real estate so that we can advance the mission. Our church is made up of people from over 60 nations. It's very multi-generational. And we're
Wow.
seeing just a move of God in our midst right now. Like we literally, the middle service, we tell people, hey, there literally are no more open seats at the 10:30 service right now. So it's pretty incredible. I outside of pastoring, I get a chance to coach and invest in kind of the entrepreneur and business community here, and that's a
Hmm.
real passion of mine. It's somewhat Bring It Out, the book is all about, and so it's never boring here.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
never boring, but the stories are incredible. I mean, I think for me it was feeling like, hey, this is what God has uniquely crafted, called me to. And I really think this is also the place where we can have personally, because of the way that God's called Shauna and I, the most influence, really from this place as opposed to somewhere else.
Yeah. And you've got to keep
So,
your finger on the pulse of all aspects of your surroundings. And so you got to strike a balance in what I filter, what I my input, and then what I filter, and then what I do with
yep,
that information, because you could probably get bogged down with some of the more polarizing negativity that might be around you or in your city. But, you've got to kind of lock in and dig into your prayer life, and really just kind of discern what the Holy Spirit wants you to do, where he wants you to do it.
yeah, I love the challenge of being here. To your point, it keeps us on our toes. It keeps us, yeah, praying dependent. I pay a lot more attention to my rhythms of what it just it it's a heavy assignment, and so it really demands mental health, emotional health, and so I'm always asking myself like how do I make sure that we have rhythms? I write about this in the book, but how do I make sure that
Hmm.
I have? And we all need these, but what are the rhythms that are going to sustain us? Because Sean and I really believe we're here for the long haul. It's already been a long haul. we've had other opportunities to go and do other things that would have been really cool, but we can't shake the calling that that God has given us.
Yeah. So if as we get kind of transition toward the book, because that's a good segue, you're talking about rhythm and those kind of things. But I would ask, what do you feel like God may be working on you most in the area of right now? I mean, you're launching, I'm sure you got a lot of irons in the fire, a lot of plates in the air. You're launching a book, you're doing some coaching. Like, what do you feel like he's kind of chiseling away at you on?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is not trying to control outcomes, including what people assume or think or have opinions of relating to me. I think, and I do write about this in the book, but I think in real time, it's just, launching a book, it's like, all right, at first it was like, oh, I've written this thing. Who cares if anyone publishes it? Then you get the contract and you're like, oh, this is amazing. Who cares if anyone reads it? But now you're in go mode and it's like, oh, I want people to read it. So like, how do I not overthink that? I feel like I've done, the best job I could. I have, shared this message with as many people as I know. And now it's like, so learning how to let that stuff rest. I think my willingness is off the charts these days, which in some ways is great. I'm willing to do whatever, but it's that reminder that I can't bear fruit on my own. And I can't make things, I need God to carry whatever it is I'm doing, including my parenting of adult children now. I need God to carry all of these things to a place where I cannot carry it on my own and to trust him, trust him with that. And then I think even as our church continues to grow larger, I no longer have relationships with everyone in the church. And so it's like, sometimes you can find yourself wanting to control the narrative of your own reputation, what people think. And you have to, I think at least I'm learning to die to that in real time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's face it. I think we all are sifting through some of the validation that we might be seeking, but we're not trying to lock our identity into. Like, it's not uncommon for people to look for that, that confirmation, that affirmation. I mean, but to your point on what the reason for the book, and there's a lot of needs out there. There's a lot of causes worth providing a solution for, because you identify a need. So you identified, hey, there's a lot of people out there that just either can't identify it or they don't know how to bring it out of themselves. Like, who did you have somebody in mind, or was this an older version of you that is kind of your avatar about this book? Or were you thinking of somebody in particular, that remains nameless, obviously?
No, well, I mean, I think in real time, so what's fun about the way that I did the book, really, it's just unpacking principles that I have learned, especially over the last decade, and I try to whittle them down, and then I'm asking the question, I think it's important, like, will this work for anyone and everyone? So rather than write the book and then try to get it published, I wrote the book, and then I turned it into a course, and then I took 200 people through the course, and that's where my confidence grew in the content. It was people of sort of, men and women, young and old, brand new in their careers, seasoned people looking at retirement, people making a lot of money, starving artists making almost no money. And so what I did is I told people in that first cohort, if they would go through the course, I would open up some free coaching on the back end. Those slots filled up faster than I thought they would. And what was cool about the confirmation was it didn't matter how much money someone was making, how long they had been in their career, how old they were, what ethnicity they were, what gender they were, to see this able to help people in real time. So I think this book is great for the person in college or just graduating college. I think it's great for the person trying to figure out, man, I've kind of lived for myself. If I were to step into what God has for me for the first time in my life, how would I do that? I think it's for the person who knows the dream in their heart, but they're afraid. And so yeah, I think the person in mind really is, it is probably a younger version of myself, trying to bring freedom and clarity to people. Like, hey, there's not a formula here, but there are a few things that you can pay attention to. And the more you pay attention to these things, the clearer you'll get on what's been put into you and the kind of assignments that would fit that well.
Yeah. I don't know where you got that idea or that concept, but that was smart. And running people through a course first, I think that's solid. So that's a great model to live by. Well, okay. So as we dig in, and I'm not going to certainly go every chapter,
Please.
and every word, because I want folks to, whet
Absolutely.
their appetite a little bit. But I guess, did you have a part of it? Because you break it down into 4 sections. Did
Yeah.
you have a section that maybe made you kind of shift in your seat a little more than another, or maybe a part that kind of stirred you in a peaceful way more than another? Obviously, you're bought into all of the concepts, but was there
Mhm.
something that kind of felt different when you were writing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most unique concept, and this is the response I've gotten, from a lot of early readers, it's just the whole concept of the wisdom table that I advocate
Mm,
for. That terminology came out of a message I taught July 2nd of 2017, and it was just sort of a series in Proverbs I was teaching on a Sunday and thinking, and then I feel like I got this image of a wisdom table. And anyway, wisdom table essentially is what it means to have a board of directors for your life. And
mm,
I think that one, helping people understand how critical that is, and then helping people understand how do you build it, what are you looking for, how do you engage your advisors in your life, and what do you do when it's time to let people go from your wisdom table. And so, there was a startup guy who posted a video of me and him on Twitter this week, and that's what he talked about, this whole wisdom table concept. It's what Pat Gelsinger, CEO of Intel, references in the forward to bring it out. So I
mm.
think I think it's probably the most unique thing that when people hear all of these themes, that's the one that they're like, wow, this is game changer. Because, if you had a for-profit company or a nonprofit organization, and you heard that either they did not have a board of directors or they didn't put wise people on that board, we would all think that's foolish.
Sure.
But in the book, I'm like, but man, our lives are more important than those organizations and companies. And so many of us don't have the right advisors sitting at our wisdom table. And so, yeah, my passion is, how do you get men and women around your wisdom table? Because whoever sits at your wisdom table is directly and indirectly going to affect your entire future. So I think that's probably the one
It's
that
so
resonates
good.
most.
Yeah, it's great. And I mean, it touches, I feel like I cover something along those lines almost every
Awesome.
week in the podcast,
Sure.
just because, you know, in a lot of interviews, and we've done almost 400 episodes and interviewed, several hundred. I just wonder, because everybody, it always comes up, like always
Mm.
have that, that group of guys or that
Yeah,
group of people and
sure.
group sourced wisdom you hear about. Well, I wonder, in your opinion, is it okay to have maybe segmented groups like that are niche wisdom table? Like, because I think why we don't, let's just assume a lot of guys don't have a great wisdom table. I
Hmm.
think if I got to go get 4 or 5 people, A, how big does the table have to be?
Yeah.
B, they ought to all that everybody at that table's got to be well rounded in every aspect of my life that I'm going to need help with or wisdom for.
Hmm.
So, what are your thoughts about like drilling into like specific areas that people are wiser at, or is that just too big of a concept to wrap our brains around?
No, I mean, my whole deal is that what I need is a well-rounded table. I don't need well-rounded individuals. I don't think there's such a thing. I mean, that's kind of what I'm advocating for in the book.
Yeah,
And so, like, the person who occupies like the financial seat, a couple people do at mine and Shauna's wisdom table for life. That's not who we're going to for our parenting. Like,
there
we
you
have
go.
someone else there. So it's kind of, again, like a
Nice.
company, you would want probably an accountant, maybe someone who's more of a brake, someone who's more of a gas, someone who's,
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, man, for me, I think like who's gonna. We need people that can give wisdom based on our vocation or the vocation that we feel called to step into. What I do think that we want them to have in common is that you can see the fruit of their wisdom. So a lot of people talk a big wisdom game, but they don't live it out. So can I see the fruit
Mm-hmm.
of their wisdom? Number two, do they want what's best for me, and are they willing to tell me the truth? I don't need yes men and women around the wisdom table for my life. And then you want to keep paying attention to that, because what happens over time is that wisdom, sometimes people have access to wisdom and they don't access that wisdom. I think about Solomon. He was the wisest person to ever live, but there
Yeah.
came a day where his heart chased other women. So he had access to wisdom, but he did not access that wisdom.
Yeah.
And I say in the book, I wonder, when Solomon no longer had the fruit of his wisdom on display, would we have been courageous enough to dismiss him from our wisdom table?
Wow.
So you got to pay attention to this, and then sometimes what happens is it's no one's fault, but there's people at my wisdom table, and it could be that my wisdom outgrows their wisdom. And so they no longer need to be there, not because they've done something wrong. It's just, hey, I think about the people that helped me get started in San Francisco. I'm no longer relying on them for how to live and thrive in San Francisco. Or so you can outgrow.
Yeah.
Or there are leaders ahead of me, but now they've not done what I'm doing right now. So why would I ask them for wisdom to lead something towards kind of an area that they've never had an experience with? So you want to pay attention to it. A lot of it is seasonal. You want to sometimes we're in a special projects and like, hey, I need to find someone who has thought about retirement, or someone who has thought about, a whole lot of things involving kids or church or whatever. So
yeah, why do you motion at me when you say retirement? That hurt a little bit. That hurt.
No, man. That's amazing.
I was transparent to you about how old I was.
I mean, if you can retire at 52,
I'm not close.
You're doing it right.
I wish. Well, so, and to the wisdom table point, also, I'm thinking a lot of times in life we gravitate toward people that have similar skill sets or interests, right? That we have things in common with. That can kind of be counterproductive to the wisdom table, because you want to, a CEO wants to hire against his weaknesses, right? So what he's weak at, he should be hiring people that are strong at that. So I don't know. I mean, I think our wisdom table right now might look like a lot of us, which we may not want. We need to probably seek. You have any idea or suggestions on seeking somebody that kind of offsets or balances what we're not great at?
Yeah, I think it's good. I think on the other point though, it's one of the things I have is like, especially people that are older than me, which most are when I think about my personal wisdom table. So in some ways, what I want to do is I want to see the 70-year-old version of Ben Pilgreen. So I do want people that are wired like me. Like I've got a mentor who, again, joking about the retirement, neither of us are close to that, but he's in his 70s now, and he has similar spiritual gifts and wiring that I have. And so I'm watching him navigate that, and that's really helpful. So I'm asking him questions like, not what is it like to be 70, but hey, man, what would you tell your mid-40s self to be paying attention to? How much, he's doing a lot of coaching and consulting. Hey, how much did you, just do your vocation within your local church versus branching out, as I'm starting to do some of that too. So I think you do want perspectives that you don't have. I mean, listen, I think if you are weak when it comes to, relationships or friendships, we need someone there that can show us the way. I think if you're weak when it comes to habits of generosity or just financial management, I think we want someone there for sure.
Yeah.
And we need people who can see our blind spots,
For sure.
But also they're not afraid to tell us what is true.
Now, I might have maybe glossed over or just missed this part, but did you ever talk about determining what, I guess, buckets you want around the table? You know what I mean? A lot of people talk about categories of life. Okay, faith, fitness, finances, all that, family. So how granular should we get, and try not to get in the weeds on?
Yeah, no, I put those things. I mean, obviously not everyone's a parent, but I think, I would think about a parenting position. I would think about the financial. I do think about the faith. Hey, what are on the faith one? It could be a whole lot of, if you're a person without faith, it's like, hey, you want someone you can trust to sort of help you understand this faith journey. But
right.
If you're just trying to be formed in a particular, character quality, man, what you want to do is go to a person who you see that quality in them and start asking questions like, hey, what are your practices? How did you build this? You're so patient. I'm impatient. How did you? So I think the faith one's a big one. I think marriage or dating, depending on what your situation is there, I think having someone in that category. I do think there are these special projects that come along where it's like, when we were starting a church, I didn't have the wisdom table language, but I needed people there seated who had started a church and had done it in a setting like San Francisco. I have a few friends in DC and New York, but there's not a lot of places there's not a lot of places like downtown San Francisco. So it's, I can gain general wisdom from a lot of places, but when it came to starting a church in the urban core downtown, man, I've got a few friends that I've connected with that have been super helpful for that. So I think it depends on what you're trying to step into, who has stepped there already. What can they show you? whatever the
good.
categories are. Customize it though.
That's good. Yeah. Well, so you also kind of talk about the who you are
Yeah,
rather than what you do. I kind of like that. I was a little
yeah,
partial to that one too.
sure, same.
So integrity over influence almost is how I phrase it. So when, we took a class or taught a class by Henry Cloud's book, Boundaries for Kids. So we did a parenting deal, and they talk a lot about developing that character in your children first.
Hmm.
Like that's got to be your first order of business right after, leading them spiritually.
Yep.
What can you tell us about maybe some ways you've grown in that area? Because like
Hmm.
guys, men listening, I mean, if we're checking boxes, we're getting it done, right? We're
Yeah,
significant, we're
yeah.
successful. So how did you sort of become more of a student of that game?
No, it's a great question. I mean, one of the things I talk about is, we all care about, or most of us at least have cared way too much about our career trajectory and not enough about our character trajectory. And listen, I care about career stuff. I mean, the rest of the book really after that section is like, here's how you figure out what to do with your life, career,
Mhm.
vocation. But yeah, I think so many people have talent that takes them to a place where their character can't sustain them. Even for me, I am much more prone to being a doer than just someone who can be. I want to accomplish, I want to go after it. And I don't apologize for that,
Mhm.
but I've got to make sure I'm not pursuing accomplishment and achievement to gain some sense of contentment or identity. That who I become really does matter more than what I do, and then why I do what I do matters more, and how I do it, and what I do still really matters. But if we get the order wrong, my premise is that if we become the right kind of people, we will probably do the right kind of thing. And if we don't become the right kind of people, will it even matter what we do?
Yeah. Wow.
So
Well, so what kind of hurdles in your life did you face like doing that? Like what were some of the more pain points that you experienced?
yeah, I mean, I'm a public figure, man. I mean, at the end of the day, I can do everything I do, even what Jesus warned against, just to be seen by people, to get applause, so that you think I'm gifted, so that you think I'm smart,
Mm,
funny. And so I still have a very public life, but it's like making sure that, I think it was Gordon MacDonald who talked about ordering your private world, like making sure, not, I'm not perfect, but to be authentic, to make sure that what can be seen, even if it gets everyone else's attention,
mhm,
making sure that I give my attention, not first and foremost to that, but who is Ben Pilgreen becoming? When the stages are gone, the microphone's off, there's no crowd, like who am I really? And my wife and kids are great checkpoints for that. I can fool other people, but I can't fool
yeah.
those closest to me. And I'm grateful for that gift. And I think the wisdom table even reinforces that too. People who
Mhm.
aren't, it's good to have people who aren't impressed with you.
That's right. That's right. Never want to be the smartest or the most talented in the room, actually.
No, no,
Well, okay. So you got me thinking a little bit on like as we're developing that, and hopefully, if we're parenting people, we have already done a decent job in building character and integrity in ourselves,
sure.
right? But there are times as Christians, so let's talk to Christians because that's mostly
Yep.
that's all the listeners really for this.
Okay.
Christian men specifically, what might be some things that prevent or make that a slower process? Like I would assume maybe some past hurt, maybe some
Yep.
baggage that we hadn't cut
Yep.
loose, maybe some things.
Yep.
So what are some things that might be constricting or pulling at that thread that unfrays some of that we're trying to weave together in that area?
Yeah, I think a few things. I think one is, people want to talk about whether ambition's a good thing or a bad thing, but ambition by itself isn't really either. It's really what is the ambition for? So I'm always asking, when it comes to my ambition, who wins besides me if things go well? And it kind of forces me to get under that. Like, who am I doing this? Who am I doing this for? What are my motives? So I think sometimes our motives can be skewed. And so we want to be able to wrestle that down and go, okay, um, what why am I after what I'm after, and to get people to speak into that. I think
Hmm.
that's helpful. I think that line from Paul in Philippians 3, that until we can let go of what's behind us, we can't move forward to what's in front of us. So I think, yeah, a lot of men, it's guilt and it's shame, and we're prone to hide and we don't do vulnerability well. And so it's like, no, we need to have brothers who we can come out and say, hey, um, this is a struggle for me. I help me understand what it's like to receive forgiveness, to embrace grace, to receive mercy. But I got to let this stuff go, but you cannot move into what God has for you if you're still enslaved by what you had done that messed you up, or what you
Mhm.
had done against God or even another person.
Yeah.
So I think we've got to let go of what's behind us. I think fear is a great paralyzer. You can have everything going for you, and fear all by itself is powerful enough to keep a man from stepping into his calling from God. I think a lot of people, again, kind of with a past, but it's not sin. It's just if you aren't willing to leave what's become familiar to you, you're gonna miss out on all the new that God has for you.
Hmm.
So you can't I can't keep a foot in the life God had for me and step into the life He's going to have for me. I've got to be able to walk away. I think about the Israelites. They're freed from Egypt. Like, why would they ever want to go back? But
Yeah.
but Egypt was such a familiar place to them. I think the comparison trap, as men or women, but men, that we're constantly stacking ourselves up. Do we measure up? Do we have more and more money, more influence, whatever the case may be? I think we've got to let go of that. I think we have to make sure we have an inner life that keeps pace ahead of our outer life. A lot of us
Yeah.
have an external life that outruns the soul part of us.
Hmm.
I think a lot of men, they don't want to embrace what I call front end pain, so they end up with back end regret. Front end pain looks like, learning something new, showing up to a small group of guys and being honest. But back in pain looks like living a life of isolation because you never stepped into community. So I think those are some of the obstacles in the way for men between where they are today and where they could
That's
be.
good. No, that's powerful. I like that front end, back end.
Yeah,
I mean, I would say too, some of that shame and that weight, that baggage from our past, it's almost a multi-pronged beast that affects the wisdom table, affects, pulling out what God has for us, identifying,
everything.
like it affects everything. I mean, I'm not going to want people around my table if I'm still holding on to this because I'm isolating, right? And I'm shameful and I'm going to go solo. It's worked for me to this point. I'm just going
Yep,
to hold on
especially for
to it
men.
and I'll deal with it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a great point. Did you have any, I don't know, I've known you about 5 seconds, but I mean, were you right out of the womb a believer? Like, is your childhood just full
Mm,
of going to church, loving Jesus, parents being great people,
mm.
wonderful? Like, talk to me about that because the reason I'm asking that is, I guess, what along the lines of kind of baggage, like, did you have to cut loose some things in order to get where you
Mm.
are now?
Yeah, great question. I grew up initially in what I would call now probably a nominal Christian family. We went to church. We were fairly involved in church, and it became a serious thing for our family, which I'm grateful for. But in high school, I was the guy that just wanted to fit in. I wasn't doing all the things that you would be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe. But just smart mouth, rebellious spirit. And I mean, this story will kind of shed some light. I so badly wanted to fit in with the people that I thought had it,
Mm-hmm.
the popular group, the people that were known. And I remember probably my junior year of high school. My mom knew that about me. My dad did as well. And my mom said, "Hey, I pray with a few ladies on Monday nights at the church, and just so you know, like we're praying for you." That's all she said. And because of my rebellious spirit at the time, I looked at my mom in the eyes and I just said, "Mom, you guys can pray for me all you want to, but I'm not going to change." And man, I'm so grateful that she did not stop praying for me. And I really think, her prayers and my father's prayers and their life and their love have so much to do with who I am today, what I'm doing today. And my mom passed away when I was only 25 years old. And
Mm.
so I think, maybe selfishly, just about her legacy is attached to anything good that God has done in my life since she passed. But yeah, there was no, I was going to church and sort of living apart from God. And my senior year of high school, this spring, I just said, it just hit me. I was at baseball practice, and it just hit me. It came out of my mouth before I even had thought about it fully, and it just was to the guy I was going to room with in college. I just said these words: "Hey, man, I just need you to know I've got to start living my life for Jesus." That just came out of my mouth, and certainly wasn't perfect from that moment to this one, and won't be. But that was really like a huge turning point. And then it was getting people in my life who again, the wisdom table concept that I had no idea of back then. College ministers, pastors who invested in my life, and my father was and still is a huge part of that wisdom table.
I'm glad I asked that question. I didn't have that in my outline.
Sure.
But I definitely wanted to get maybe into the layers kind of beyond, a little bit further back chronologically
Yeah,
to
it's great.
find out. You mentioned Louisiana, kind of off topic a little bit. Did you grow up in
Yes,
Louisiana?
I did. Yeah,
Whereabouts?
I grew up in Monroe, right there off
Oh,
of
okay.
Interstate 20.
Okay.
Yep.
So you were the original Duck Dynasty, apparently.
I mean, listen, I don't know if that gets me points in San Francisco, but yeah, close to where,
Maybe not.
close to where they are.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, I just curious. We lived
Yeah.
in over near New Orleans, not in New,
Okay.
but for a while, but we're from Oklahoma. So anyway, I
Nice.
digress. Well, I guess transitioning to the $1 million question that every guy
Yeah.
wants to know about. And okay, God, what am I here for? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm good at some things, but why?
Yeah.
Where is that going to be most utilized? How can I further and promote, or promote the kingdom, grow the kingdom, influence the kingdom
Yeah.
with these gifts that seem either irrelevant, inconsequential? Maybe they're just kind of run of the mill, average things about me that
Yeah.
I think I'm good at. That's a really long way, but
Yeah.
what do you think? I mean, what do we do with that?
Yeah, man. I think the first thing we've got to do is stop apologizing for the way God made us.
Wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just imagine you're the creator and you hear your children constantly saying things like, I only have, I can only do, I'm just average. And I just think about like the same way we would have a heart when our kids like, I'm just nothing. It's like, so I think we've got to stop apologizing because we think it's just a bad reflection on us. But if we're not the ones who created ourselves, then it's a pretty negative reflection on the one who made us.
Yeah. In
So,
his image, right? We're in his image.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a, yeah. No
Come on.
offense.
Yeah. So what God gives us is his gift to us. I think what we do with it is our gift back to him and hopefully to the world. So what I try to do in the book is like, let's take the pressure off. This is not a formula. We act like the bullseye is so narrow. And again, I do think there's a bullseye, but it's like we act like, oh, am I doing the exact right thing? And I think it's like we need 100% certainty before we step out. And I know that waiting on God is par for the course, but there's sometimes where God's waiting on us, and He's like, I'm ready, but you're waiting for 100%, like you're waiting for something to be written in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
So, man, I think, but I do think there are some things we can do. Number one is like let's be on a daily mission to increase our God awareness. Like, what is this God like who's made me? What does He care about? What does He value? What does He delight in? Let's get to know that.
There might be a manual about that, by the way. There might be a manual. Yeah.
Number two, let's increase our self-awareness. Who is this me that this God has made? Like what am I passionate about? One question to ask is like, what comes easy to me that's hard for most people? A lot of us men on this program, we think if it comes easy to me, it should come easy to everyone, but it doesn't, which means there's something, even in a natural gifting, before we get to spiritual gifts, there's something you have, like that's a unique ability. We want to pay attention to that. And then to your point, it's like, what does God put in my hands and my heart that can make a difference in the world? And this could be raising kids who change the world. It could be being a great neighbor. It could be starting a company. It could be huge in the world's eyes or small in the world's eyes. But if it's what God has for you, let's stop calling it insignificant. It's not. The most significant thing you can do with your life is whatever God has for you, whether you get a lot of applause for it or no one ever sees it.
That's really good. Because I mean, You're reading my mail on that, because I think I've
Mm,
gone through seasons where, I mean, even in this podcast world and being an author,
sure.
a self-published author, but still, I almost did the whole just thing right there. I just am a
There it
self-published
is.
author. I
I'm
almost
just,
said that. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So that's me, because you get that imposter syndrome, and then you think,
yeah, same.
I'm not really, I don't have all the followers. I'm not an influence. So we
Yeah,
get into that, right? But I figured out that that's as unproductive as you can imagine. So yeah, I always tell people aligning our passions with our gifts, and where they intersect and collide with a need that might be out there. I
yeah,
think that's your
100%.
formula, right? And so, I mean, what holds guys back? Let's assume we've done that. Let's assume,
Yeah,
okay, I know what I'm good at. I know what I love.
yeah,
I know what my skill sets are. I
yeah,
even know maybe a sphere that it might actually benefit,
yeah,
but we're still maybe stuck in that dream phase, right? Or we're kind of stuck in that
yeah.
aspiration phase. Help us get out of that.
Yeah, I mean, two words I like to think about in combination with each other are words that we don't typically put together, and they are urgency and patience.
Mm,
If you are naturally an urgent, moving kind of guy, then the discipline you need to develop is patience.
mm-hmm.
If you are naturally patient, you need to develop the discipline of urgency. And so someone explained it to me, like, if a huge project, like stepping into your whatever it's going to be, like the big vision of your life, if you imagine it, that it takes 10,000 steps to kind of get to completion.
Mm-hmm.
Well, listen, I can wake up today. I cannot go those 10,000 steps today, but I can take the next 5 steps.
Mm-hmm.
And I think again, it's we underestimate, no one when they reach some pinnacle of like significant accomplishment, when you ask them, "Hey, how did you do that?" No one says, "Oh, you know what? It happened overnight." Like that doesn't happen. I think about Joseph in the book of Genesis. He has a dream about being a great leader, and he probably thinks next week he's going to be a leader, and it's 13 years later that dream and vision is fulfilled. And so stay patient,
Mm-hmm.
but do something, learn about the thing, get around people who've already, that's the wisdom tale, get around people who've done the thing. Some people, like, there's going to be a cost with it, usually a financial cost. It could be, going back to school. It could be getting a course. It could be hiring a coach. I mean, there are all kinds of things we can do, but what a lot of us do until we can see the 100 steps all laid out, we do nothing, which I think is sad, and means 3 years from now we'll be in the same place.
Yeah, 1,000% co-sign that statement. And I mean, there's fear, there's all kinds of things, because like you said earlier, waiting for this lightning bolt moment. We're waiting for this,
Yeah,
evident green light to take that step, because we're afraid to fail, and we're afraid we're going to let people down. We're going to afraid whatever. I mean, you kind of unpack the paralyzer for us too. Like,
yeah.
is there a formal kind of thing that that you go into? Like, what would you
Hmm.
say? It's probably different for everybody, but what's kind of a constant?
I think fear is like the big paralyzer, and I used to believe that I had to get rid of all fear before I could step into the new kind of exciting thing. But what I've realized is I don't have to get rid of all of my fears. I just need a little more courage than I have fear.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just need to do things with fear present, asking God to help you take the step. A lot of people, because fear is present, we don't take the step. But what if we just
Hmm.
like, okay, I am sort of afraid, but God, you said you would be with me. I'm stepping out in faith. I think this is something for me. Like, let's go for it. And John, I think about, not because God couldn't have done it a different way, but if fear had kept me from planting this church in San Francisco, what would I have missed out on? What would my kids have missed out on? What would thousands of people in this city? We've given millions
Mm.
of dollars away to our mission partner. Like, what would people have missed out on? And man, I think for everyone that is the equation. It's like, what's here's a for the men listening. I mean, a question I was asking myself yesterday about kind of a big risk move I think I need to make. It was just like two questions. What's at stake if I make this move? That can be scary. But then the second question, what's at stake if I don't?
Mm. And
And
both require honesty with
yeah,
yourself. You
and I
got to
didn't
be
get rid
super
of all
honest.
fears. I didn't get
Yeah.
rid of all fears. I actually got an overarching fear from my life, which is this. I became most afraid, not of failure. I became most afraid, what if I live my entire life without ever having gone after the thing that God put in my heart? That's
Dang.
what I didn't want to go to my grave with.
Yeah. And I've heard people talk about how on their deathbed, their biggest fear is meeting the person they could have been, right? Kind of the same,
Yeah.
similar to the
Yeah.
same line, along the same lines. Well, man, it's good, dude. I know we're up against a little bit against
Sure.
time. Well, you're on West Coast, so you got all
I
day.
am on the West Coast. I've got a
Yeah.
few hours until my weekend starts.
Well, all right. So I've heard people talk about, you know, pray like it's all up to God, work like it's all up to
Yeah.
me. That I guess that's a bumper sticker. I don't know. So how do you know when it's your
Mm,
time to step in? Like, God's
yeah.
kind of spoke to you maybe, and you feel a leading of the Holy Spirit direction. How do you know
Yeah.
what's his and what's ours to actually grab a
Yeah.
hold of?
I think in most situations or in every endeavor, almost, there's a part for God to play and a part for us to play. I believe, and it's really important to try to ask that question. What is God's part in this? And the answers could vary depending on what we're doing and what God has for us to do. But God's part, my part, let's start with my part. My part is to pray. My part is to obey. My part is to steward whatever I've been given. But really, God's part is to do the leading, is to do the heavy lifting. Um, a picture I used to have in my mind about like God giving us assignments. I used to think that it's like, okay, we go to God in prayer, He hands us an assignment, and then we go and do the job, and then we come back and present it to Him. But now, and I like this more and more, it's like, no, no, no. God gives me the assignment, and then He puts to go with me if I'll invite Him.
Right, right, right.
So, like when I'm writing this book, God will write it with me. He's not waiting for me to deliver it by myself. Jesus said, apart from Him, we can't do anything, but with Him, we could bear much fruit. And so, I'm learning just what does it look like to invite God into this space? Hey, this
Yeah.
parenting moment, this organizational leadership moment, this hard conversation, this dream, the book, the vision, whatever. And so, I think it's like getting a sense of, and I think more than most of us can imagine, I think there are times where God gives us choice in the matter. But
Hmm.
we're so afraid of getting it wrong that we think that, yeah, I just think there's a lot of times He gives us freedom.
Sure. Yeah, I agree.
Especially if we become the right kind of person.
Yeah.
Dallas Willard talks about God wants us to become a person that He can trust to do what needs to be done, even if He doesn't lay it all out for us. And to your point, He's laid so much of it out already.
Yeah, I'm glad you said what you said about inviting him to be a part of the process along the way. Like that doesn't mean you're just letting go and letting God, right? You're getting the assignment and then
Right.
you're actually utilizing, or he wouldn't have given you those gifts if he wanted you to just sit on your hands. But then there is he is kind of he's escorting us through. He's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like a spotter if you're working out, like, I got to be a part of that. I got to move the weight. I got to get my, dirt under my fingernails, but he's spotting me and he's protecting, he's
Yeah.
covering. So, yeah, I mean, but I think you said it earlier. The key to all this is knowing him and getting in the word and understanding who he is, what he wants for us, how good he is, and then
Yeah.
just how to hear him. And so all of that's in the manual. I promise. Um,
Amen.
all right, man. As we close up, man, what do you wish we would have talked about today? I mean, any last maybe parting, just for a listener to go away with something that maybe we didn't cover?
Yeah, I mean, there could be a person listening who thinks that their ship has sailed, that, man, they heard that calling, they had the dream planted in their heart, but they didn't do anything with it, and they feel like they've lost their chance. And I just would come alongside and say, listen, if there is still breath in your lungs and
Mm-hmm.
a heart that is beating, God still has something He wants to do. God loves to resurrect dead dreams, or He loves to birth new dreams. And so I think, like, hold your head up high, stop playing the "it's over for me" game. Open your eyes. God has done so many things with so many people who thought their ship had sailed on their purpose. He loves to give fresh purpose or to resurrect a purpose that was there before.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to ask you a hot seat question that I didn't plan to ask.
I'm
And
ready.
so, for all of if you share this, which I hope you do, for all of your close knit preacher friends, pastor friends, we're going to take them out of the equation. So you can't say any of them. See, that protects you right there. That protects you from what I'm
Okay.
about to ask.
Yeah.
Aside from your closest 5 or 6 pastor friends,
Yeah.
who's your favorite? Who's your favorite preacher right now, today, Bible teacher, preacher, just charisma, style, delivery, gift. Who's your favorite?
Yeah.
You have to pick
That's
one too. That's
no,
brutal.
I will pick one. He is a friend though, but it's not because of our friendship.
Okay, okay. All right. Well, I just didn't want your other
Yeah,
one to get offended, so I was trying to eliminate.
no, nobody will be offended. I would probably say John Tyson, probably in New York City,
Okay.
Church of the City. Yeah,
Dang.
he's
Yeah.
Australian. He's got that accent,
Okay.
passion for prayer and revival, but also navigating a real secular city like New York, like what I'm in. So that's helpful.
Very good. All right. Well, I guess you can share it with him. You can share this episode with him then, I guess.
He'll be
Any
happy.
so okay, so we're releasing on my birthday, of course, August
Let's
27th.
go.
Where can we get it? Where can we maybe reach out to you if we have questions
Yeah.
once we read the thing?
Yeah, the book's available everywhere. Amazon, obviously. I did do my own audiobook. That was super cool. So if you're into audiobooks, you can hear me read it. I think it's 4 hours, 34 minutes, so not super long.
Yeah.
But yeah, Target, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Baker, who's the publisher, you can get it at their website. And then to get a hold of me and all the things, I deliver weekly content at benpilgreen.com. All of my coaching stuff is there, speaking, and then I lead Epic Church in San Francisco, and all those messages are on YouTube and elsewhere.
So the book is on benpilgreen.com as well, I would assume.
Yep, it'll at least give you connections to all the places.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And epicchurch.com or what?
Yep.
Okay.
EpicSF.com. Yeah, just like not church, but just Epic SF.
Got it.
Yep. As in San Francisco.
Yep. All right. Go Niners, I guess. I'm a Saints fan, but go Niners. It's about time,
nice.
man. How are you not? You're
need-
North Louisiana, but still.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're all San Francisco stuff out here. So Giants,
Yeah.
Niners.
Oh,
We
right.
raised our kids here, so we just got all into it. I know.
Understandable. All right. Well, hey, it's been a pleasure to meet you, man. Well done on this book.
Same, John.
And outstanding. I appreciate you taking time. Audience, with that, he has been the one and only Ben Pilgreen. We've been last in line. Be blessed.